God's Little Acre is a 1933 novel by Erskine Caldwell about a dysfunctional farming family in Georgia obsessed with sex and wealth. The novel's sexual themes were so controversial that the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice asked a New York state court to censor it. The novel was made into a film of the same name in 1958. Though controversial, the novel became an international bestseller with over 10 million copies sold. The novel is Caldwell's most popular novel, though Caldwell's reputation is often tied to Tobacco Road novel, which was listed in the Modern Library 100 Best Novels. Plot summary. Please note that there are a couple of mistakes regarding the plot. Ty Walden is a widower who owns a small farm in Georgia, just across the border from South Carolina. His daughter, Rosamond, is married to Will Thompson, a worker in a cotton textile mill. Another daughter, whom everyone in the novel refers to as Darling Jill, is unmarried. His son, Buck Walden, is married to the beautiful Griselda. Buck and Griselda live on the farm with Ty, and along with Ty's other, unmarried, son, Shaw. Ty is obsessed with finding gold on his land. Ty, Buck, and Shaw spend their entire time digging holes on the farm. Ty has promised to donate any profits generated by a 1-acre, 4,000 square meters, parcel of the farm to the church, but is terrified that gold will be found on God's acre, so he keeps moving the acre around. Only two African-American hired hands, Uncle Felix and Black Sam, do any farming on the property, and the Waldens largely live off loans and what little income Felix and Sam generate. Another important character is Pluto Swint, an obese and lazy farmer seeking election as county sheriff. Pluto sexually desires and wants to marry Darling Jill, who constantly humiliates him. The novel is told from a third-person perspective. The novel is set in the early 1930s. The local union of mill workers was locked out by management 18 months ago after they protested against a wage cut. Extensive poverty now afflicts the towns of Scottsville and Clarks Mill and the Horse Creek Valley, where the Waldens live. Will fantasizes about entering the mill and turning on the power again to bring employment back to the townspeople. The novel opens with Pluto Swint arriving at the Walden farm to announce that he is running for sheriff. Pluto mentions that an albino will be able to dowse for gold, and tells Ty that an albino was spotted in the southern part of the county. Ty, Buck, and Shaw drive off to kidnap the albino. Pluto and Darling Jill drive to the Thompson house in Scottsville, and spend the night there. The next morning, Will makes love to Darling Jill while Rosamond sleeps in the same bed next to them. Rosamond wakes, beats Darling Jill with a hairbrush, and attempts to shoot Will. Will flees the house. Rosamond and Darling Jill reconcile. They both realize that Will, who is sexually promiscuous, will never love either of them. Yet they cannot stop loving him. That night, Pluto drives Rosamond and Darling Jill to Ty's house near Augusta. On the way, they talk about Jim Leslie, another son of Ty's, who started as a mill worker and married a rich man's daughter. Jim has become a wealthy cotton broker who now snubs mill workers as lintheads. Ty, Buck, and Shaw return with the albino, a boy in his late teens named Dave Dawson. Ty speaks at length about Darling Jill's beauty. After supper, Dave takes Darling Jill into the woods and has intercourse with her. Ty and Buck search for them, and then watch them make love. The second day, Will arrives at the Walden farm. Buck and Shaw, who suspect that Will is seducing Griselda, engage in a fistfight with him, but Ty breaks it up. Will talks to Dave, who says he does not want to return to his poverty-stricken home in the southern swamps. That night, The family drives into town so Tai can ask his estranged son Jim Leslie for a loan. Tai, Darling Jill, and Griselda meet with Jim, who gives Tai $300. Jim tells Griselda that he sexually desires her and she must sleep with him as payment for the loan. She refuses. Jim attempts to sexually assault her, but fails. Later that night at the Walden farm, Tai and Buck discover Dave and Uncle Felix asleep in the barn. A short time later, Tai watches Darling Jill undress. There are undercurrents of incest throughout the novel. The morning of the third day, Pluto drives Will, Rosamond, Darling Jill, and Griselda back to the Thompson house in South Carolina. Will goes out drinking. When he returns that afternoon drunk, he forces Griselda to strip naked in front of the others. He chases Griselda into another room of the house, and they have sexual intercourse all night long. Rosamond, Darling Jill, and Pluto watch and listen through the open door. Darling Jill becomes sexually aroused by Will's behavior. Rosamond, Darling Jill, Pluto, and Griselda talk the next morning, but do not discuss what happened. During the fourth day, Will learns that the mill owners have brought in out-of-state security guards to keep the plant closed. He and some other men break into the plant and turn the machinery on. The guards kill Will. That night, Darling Jill has intercourse with Pluto. Will is buried on the morning of the fifth day. That afternoon, Pluto drives Darling Jill, Rosamond, and Griselda to the Walden farm. Tai, Buck, and Shaw learn of Will's death. Buck suspects that Griselda has been unfaithful with Will. The family argues ferociously during dinner, and Buck runs out of the house and does not return. Pluto also leaves that night. On the morning of the sixth day, Jim Leslie arrives at the farm. The text implies that he is demanding sex with Griselda. At that moment, Buck returns. Seeing what are Leslie's intentions, he shoots and kills Jim, his own brother. Tai begins obsessively digging. In the final paragraphs, it is implied that Buck commits suicide with a shotgun. Themes. Published by Viking Press in 1933. God's Little Acre was in part influenced by textile mill strikes in Gastonia, North Carolina. The novel is proletarian, focusing on the plight of workers deprived of union protection. Similarly, the novel deals with the misuse and abuse of land in the South. Controversy. God's Little Acre contained scenes considered sexually explicit, leading the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice to take Caldwell and Viking Press to court for disseminating pornography. Over 60 literary figures supported the book, placing pressure on the New York Magistrates Court, which ruled in favor of Caldwell's rights to freedom of expression. Caldwell countersued the Literary Society for false arrest and malicious prosecution. In 1947, the city of St. Paul, Minnesota, also banned the novel for being pornographic. The book was banned in Boston upon the recommendation of the Watch and Ward Society in 1950. One of the Society's final activities of censorship. Boston continued censoring works into the 1960s. Cultural. In the 1955 film Mr. Roberts' Ensign Pulver, Jack Lemmon proudly states that he read God's Little Acre through to the end. Mr. Roberts, Henry Fonda, is not impressed and tells Doc William Powell he's been reading God's Little Acre for over a year now. He's underlined every erotic passage and added exclamation points. And after a certain pornographic climax, he's inserted the words "well written." Billy Bob Thornton's character in the Amazon series Goliath S1E2 uses God's Little Acre as a reference for redefining rock bottom in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting.